Hey guys, how you doing today? I'm actually just about to go to bed, and I thought, hey, I haven't recorded a video today, so I think I'm going to do that. Um, so today, the thing that I've seen that is absolutely worth talking about is Toronto's City Council votes 24 to 1, approving to move forward with designing a vacant home tax. Um, you guys know me. I think politicians are very, very lazy and very, very cowardly. And so something like a vacant home tax, while it sounds good, like if you push through a blank piece of paper that has a title on it that says vacant home tax, and then it's like we're adding a 0.1% vacant home tax. That'll be as effective as it is, which is not at all. But the idea behind it is that uh, wealthy millionaires and billionaires, right? They take a look at our housing market and they don't think, here is housing for average citizens to live in. They see a commodity to be exploited and hoarded for that purpose. That they're buying up properties so that they can hang on to them for a little while, wait for the value of the property to go up, and then resell that property. They're not interested in people living in that property, right? They're not interested in renting that property out. They already have millions of dollars and billions of dollars. They don't need to um, they don't need to do any of that rental stuff. And a lot of times, like if you're a millionaire billionaire type, right? You don't want the hassle. You don't want the hassle of that. You want empty places that sit there accruing value simply by their existence, and that's what they're doing, right? But what that means for the people who are actually attempting to live in the city is that there are half empty condo towers, half empty apartment buildings, completely empty houses, completely empty properties, uh, while people are attempting to pay rent. And so, what you're fundamentally doing is removing housing from the market, right? You're just taking housing out of the market and saying, uh, 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 and that's going to mess with the price of housing, right? Like if you have 10 houses, uh, and then suddenly a millionaire billionaire buys five of them, takes them out of the market so that you only have five houses that are actually being rented to anybody, well, then the price of housing is going to go up. And it's getting ridiculous now. Like, it's getting ridiculous now. Like, I'm living in, like, the littlest, shittiest, tiniest apartment that you can imagine. If it got smaller than this, it would basically be a coffin. And it takes 60% of my wages. Like, it's absurd. And so, kudos to John Tory uh, for moving forward with this. Kudos to the Toronto City Council. This article I'm reading is not being upfront about who is the one voting against this, right? That's something I'd like to know. Blog TO. Who is the one voting against this? And why are they voting against it? I can't imagine a stupider idea than actually voting against something like this. And but the thing that I think that I could talk about for sure is that, at the end of the day, John Tory has been a reasonable mayor. I think after the Rob Ford fiasco and how absolutely asinine and stupid he was, people were really looking for just stability. They were looking for something calm. They were really looking for a vision, right? This is what was so interesting about that election on the lead up to John Tory's election, is that Tory was trailing Olivia Chow at the time. Olivia Chow being the wife of former NDP leader Jack Layton, who had the potential, if he hadn't passed due to cancer, who had the potential to become the Prime Minister of Canada. He's very popular and very well liked. And Olivia Chow ran to be the mayor of Toronto. And there's this distinct and clear moment that happened in Toronto politics where the editor of Now magazine, which is a leftist magazine here in Toronto, maybe one of the last leftist magazines in publication in Canada. And Now magazine, the editor of Now magazine, publishes an open letter to Olivia Chow, where he actually says, like, what's the vision here? Like, what we understand that you're Jack Layton's wife. We understand that you are likely in that sphere of the NDP. What are your ideas? What are your visions for what Toronto is supposed to look like? What do you have to bring to the table? And Olivia Chow responded, which bold choice if you ask me. Olivia Chow responded by saying that she didn't believe that it was the job of a politician to have a vision. And this, in my view, completely costs her the election. It completely shakes the foundation of her support. And John Tory and her flip in the polls about 6 weeks out from the election, which is when this kind of stuff happens. About 6 weeks out from the election, John Tory is under Olivia Chow, and then they just flip, and John Tory walks away with the election. And even at the time, I think I wasn't mad about it. Like, who wants to elect someone who's in sort of the leftist camp, who's standing up saying, I have no ideas and I don't really care to implement anything? And if you actually take a look at John Tory's record, I think the thing that you can say about him is that he's reasonable. This is the thing that's interesting about John Tory as a politician, right? I don't agree with everything he's ever done, right? I don't agree with some of his stances and some of the things that he does. But I understand why he's doing what he's doing. And the things that he's doing are not outrageous or harmful. I don't even think they are thoughtless or off the cuff or anything like that. I think that John Tory, while he is not the mayor that I would support, I completely understand why people do. And I completely understand the disagreements that we have. I understand why he's making the decisions that he does and why he believes that he's making the right decision by doing them. And that by itself, I think, makes John Tory a superior politician to most of the politicians that we actually have. Here I am, right? I'm actually going to talk. I'm going to praise a politician. His name is John Tory. Like, when the Toronto City Council moved forward to pass the poverty reduction strategy here in Toronto, it was John Tory's signature on it. Hard to be against a man who is actually working with and communicating with the experts of poverty reduction and attempting to forward a strategy in order to make it happen. He's recently come out in favor of a basic income because now the evidence is on the table, right? Like, the evidence is there. The basic income works. He understands that it works. And so, and now, like, here's this housing thing, right? To put in a vacant housing tax, and it's happening under a John Tory administration. These are all good things. It's very, like, I take a look at these things that are being accomplished under a John Tory administration, and when I compare it to, like, the previous governments, I'm like, what did these chuckleheads do? When I compare it to the federal liberals, like, what are these federal liberals doing? They're just chuckleheads. Like, what's the Doug Ford administration doing? They're just chuckleheads. Like, they're not interested in actually dealing with the nitty gritty daily, day to day life of people, right? If you're the mayor of a city, you have to do that, right? If you're a city councilor, like, you have to do that. Like, people's nitty gritty day to day life is what you're dealing with. And if you become like the premier, you can afford to sort of step away from that, take a bit more of a meta perspective. But if you don't care about the meta perspective, the way that the Fords never cared about the meta perspective, uh, then you're just fine turning it into a boys' club for yourself. Something that John Tory never did. I think that when it's John Tory's time to leave office, people will look back on his administration, if not fondly, certainly with this sense that that was a reasonable man who seemed to be genuinely interested in the success of his city and the success of the people within it, and not just the rich people. Not just the rich people. Like, and that's something rare in a politician, especially one that ascends to a high office, right? I think it's actually quite rare to get a politician who is actually looking at policies and asking questions and considering not only the wealthy, but also the impact on the poor, and also the impact on the workers, and also the impact on what's going to happen to the people living on the streets. I wish more of our politicians thought that way. I wish more of our politicians would actually take a walk through some of these neighborhoods where there's a lot of suffering, where there's a lot of people who have been rendered homeless. I wish that they could take a look at it. I'll never forget, I was working at a Starbucks, and it was a Starbucks that was right near an overpass, right near the Gardner. And there were these homeless people that lived under the overpass. That was ostensibly their home for the most part. That's where they were. And they would occasionally come into the Starbucks, uh, maybe to use the public washroom. Occasionally they would have enough change. They would just get like a coffee as a treat for themselves. And I would talk to these people, and they were fine people, as fine as any I'd ever met. But they were obviously abandoned and in complete distress. I'll never forget the one woman who would continuously come in, and her teeth were black. And when I would talk to her, she seemed perfectly lovely. Just a perfectly normal, average Canadian, just she's been abandoned. And the disconnect that exists between her position in the society and the position of mayor is vast and wide. And I do believe that John Tory at least attempted to alleviate some kind of suffering for her. Do I think he was successful? Not at all. Not at all. But I don't think there's an easy answer, and I don't think that he is necessarily the one who is in the position to be able to alleviate, to answer that question. John Tory is like, to be the mayor of a city, right? You have borders of power. You can't make vast structural changes as the mayor of a city. You can call up the chain, you can request on a higher level, but you can't like call the Bank of Canada and say, "Hey, can you print a bunch of money to help our city?" You have to go through the proper channels, and that means talking to your premier, and the premier talks to the prime minister. And right now we've got every major city in Canada has called for a basic income at this point. Toronto has, Calgary has, Edmonton has, I believe Vancouver has, Winnipeg has. We are just waiting for a reasonable party to come in. And the more and more we learn about these liberals, the more and more we see that they are not actually reasonable. That they are interested in looking reasonable, but they're not actually reasonable. Because the suffering that people are experiencing, the real suffering that people are experiencing is going to require a hard look at our system, at the systems that we exist in. But we've done it before. We have a universal healthcare system because we took a hard look at our society and said, no, we are not going to abandon the most vulnerable amongst us. Like, no, their healthcare concerns are not going to be dismissed. And now we have, like, the doctors of Ontario have outright come out and said that the number one healthcare concern is poverty. And that the most efficient way to alleviate that would be through a basic income. But of course, now there's talk that a basic income will be passed and there will be all these strings attached to it. And I think people are very concerned about that. Because ultimately what it looks like they want to do is they want to ensure that if you get a basic income that you stay there. And you always stay there. That you can't own anything or elevate your position at all. Which essentially redoes the welfare trap, right? The welfare trap being that, well, if you're getting benefits and then you go to work, you lose those benefits. So it's disincentivized your inclination to work. Like, you're not going to dismiss the thing you're surviving off of so that you can go work for some capitalist. And so it creates this barrier needlessly. And I think people are getting very concerned that if some kind of system was to be pushed through like that, that is what it would look like. Which is like the antithesis of what a basic income actually is. Like, the entire point of a basic income is that everyone just gets a certain level of wealth to subsist with. And that eventually that subsistence wage goes away as you no longer need it to subside. Right? Like, once $2,000 a month is not a big deal for you, that's when it should begin its clawback. And there's so much wealth accrued in the hands of so few that this could be done. This could be done. And reasonable politicians like John Tory are seeing that, right? And they're beginning to understand that, like, oh, we have millionaires and billionaires walking around. Like, this idea that we can have even a single billionaire walking around while there are people sleeping under underpasses, their teeth rotting out of their head, is laughable and absurd, right? The statement, how are you going to pay for that, is laughable while there's a billionaire walking around. Like, what do you think? How do you think it's going to happen? And at this stage in the game, I do have to say it straightly. Like, I have to say it as straightly as I possibly can. If John Tory were to cease being the mayor of Toronto and run to be the premier of Ontario, or even run to be the Prime Minister of Canada, I'd vote for him. Because I've seen a man who at least is attempting, right? Who's at least attempting to confront these serious issues, the serious issue of poverty, and is at least attempting to do something about it. And not in a pretend kind of way, not like the way the liberals do, not in this kind of like pandering sort of way, but in a genuine way where you can see that he hopes that it will work, right? And even though I do think that the poverty reduction strategy in Toronto has largely been a failure, it's been a failure not for lack of trying, but simply because the ideas brought out by the poverty reduction strategy were outdated. They were sort of rooted in an old way of thinking about how an economy works and how a society can function. But now people are really beginning to see, like, wait, why are we gonna, like, we're gonna hire a whole bunch of bureaucrats to funnel people through a system when we literally could just give those people money? Like, and so here I am saying straight up, if a reasonable man like John Tory wants to continue ascending sort of the chain of politics, yep, I'll vote for him. Yep. Because I think at least he'll try. The liberals do not try. They pretend to try to garner votes. The conservatives certainly do not try. But I think John Tory will. So, good luck to you, John Tory. Keep doing the good work. Every single time I see an article about you, it's something that I at least I think you're trying. And right now, that's good enough, baby. Good luck. Oh, hey, if you've made it to this point, subscribe. If you're not subscribed, just do it. Hit the button. I make these videos every single day. All right. Bye.